Hey, how's it going? I'm Sarah, and today in this video I'm going to be critiquing three different screen adaptations of the novel Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. Since its original publishing in 1862, it's been turned into movies, plays, and even a musical. But again, I'm only be looking at three today. So for the first version, I watched the 1935 film by 20th Century Pictures. It was directed by Richard Boslowski, and it was made in the U.S. Most notably, the movie starred Frederick March as Jean Valjean and Charles Laughton as Inspector Javert. Overall, this film was a good movie. What I mean by that is that the cinematography is great for 1935, and there's all the things I like about this version. It's only 109 minutes, it's easy to sit down and watch, just like any other movie, and it keeps really good pace throughout the whole picture. The acting is fantastic. The actors and the use of light and music help to convey emotion. Jean Valjean's character is emotional, and the whole movie is pretty dramatic, actually. The music also helps to keep the movie going forward, and there's also a few fun chase scenes as well. For someone who isn't interested in watching a long movie, the 1935 version would serve them well. Unfortunately, while this is a great movie, it strays away from the book a lot. There's a lot of inaccuracies in the plot and the timeline. They really had to cut it down, and they sacrificed characters like Gavroche, my favorite, and they strayed away from many of the themes in the novel. It's not it's not a very clean adaptation, and while there is hardship involved in the characters' lives, it does not really go into a lot of depth. And many characters, I believe, don't really get the backstory that adds importance to their characters. Some examples of the cleaning up: Chavert's suicide isn't shown, Fantine isn't depicted as a prostitute, the sewers are remarkably clean, so anyone who is very familiar with Les Mis might be disappointed by this version. Hugo's novel is not really well represented. The version focuses on prison reform in society, and there's not really a hint at the fight for political reform, which is a huge part of what the ABC was actually fighting for. The effort, I think, to shorten the story in length and to keep it from getting overwhelmingly complex really limited its ability to be everything that Victor Hugo would like to see. I think if he himself was told, hey, we turned your book into a movie, and he watched this version, he'd be pretty disgusted, and I think that he would be rolling over in his grave. They brought out the best of the story, and they left all the important stuff behind. Before Depression-era Hollywood movie, I think that this movie was impressive and was able to really represent that hardship that many Americans faced at this time, and that is what really spoke to the country, and I think that's purely why it was as successful as it was when it was released. The next version I saw was Jean-Paul Lechanois' 1958 version. This one was made by the French people, so I have higher hopes that it would do the novel justice. It also meant that it was all in French, so subtitles are my best friend here. I really like this movie more than the 1935 one. It struck me more true to what my idea of Les Mis was and what the characters were like, and overall it was just a better representation of what Hugo would have liked to have seen in a screen adaptation. The film starred Jean Gabin as Jean Valjean. I really love the way that he portrayed him. He's not as outwardly emotional as Frederick March in his portrayal, but he does have the same internal and external conflicts. He probably comes off to an American audience as more stoic, maybe because he is French, and so he's going to carry those same French mannerisms better than an American version. And that alone, I think, is reason enough to like this version better, because it's probably more true to how Victor Hugo imagined or conceptualized the characters and their demeanor. Because this film was 217 minutes compared to the 109 of the 1935 version, I think they were able to, that really helped them to include much, much more in a more fantastic way, I think. Now, this movie definitely was a product of the 1950s. The set was very bright and colorful. There's a full orchestral sound the entire time. I haven't really appreciated that, so it never really bothered me, even though I can understand why some people would find that distracting today, if they're not familiar with that kind of movie making. During the 1950s and 1960s, France was going through a lot, dealing with their colonies, and frankly, I don't think they wanted to be colonies anymore, so that led to a lot of struggle. And so because of that political struggle at the time of the movie, when it was being made, I think viewers in France were much more able to relate to the ABC and their political struggle, and the politics of Hugo's novel was way more better represented since they were a bigger part of the movie as well. Which, something that was kind of weird, though, about this movie was that the movie had this motif of happiness throughout, and Hugo didn't really talk too much about being happy or the importance of happiness in the novel, so I think it's kind of like a bonus theme that's kind of extraneous to Hugo's themes, but that's okay. Lastly, of course, I had to watch the 2012 musical with all those big names, Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, Anne Hathaway, Eddie Redmayne, and so many more. I'm going to have to save talking about the music for the end because I'm sure that's what you're most excited to talk about. There's so much criticism when this movie was released. Everything from overacting, bad singing, general awkwardness throughout the whole thing. All the things that critics hated about this movie, I loved. That's what I think gives it its uniqueness and charm and the feel that I think was the most important to the film's success. Tom Hooper, the director, had wanted to do this movie for such a long time, but he had to wait until the right type of actors came along. Actors that could really relate to the characters, understand the point of Les Mis, actors that could act with great emotion about serious topics, actors that could sing, kind of. The chemistry of the actors was also key to the movie, and I think he got really lucky when they chose the right time to decide to start seeing who was interested in making this film, making it real. So beyond that, the cinematography is really something to note. They wanted a very real, very raw feeling from the movie. Nobody looked pretty in makeup. The camera angles were definitely not attractive, and the vocals were not touched up. In most recorded musicals, the actors might sing as they film, but then later they go into a studio and redo it. But that's not really what happened here. They sang and they acted at the same time, and there's so much talent work that's reflected in the final product. That's pretty amazing. And that's the kind of adaptation I think Hugo would have wanted. Something real, something less Hollywood. After all, Les Mis isn't a pretty story. It's a real one. I think they definitely took that to heart when they were making that movie. Of course, it really helps that in the 2012 version they had a huge budget, and the technology today can do wondrous things. And of course, that's really going to reflect in the final product of the movie as well. Now, the musical existed way before it was turned into a movie in 2012, so no one involved in making it a movie then was responsible for how great the music is, so I'm kind of critiquing this separately. But the songs are important to note because they're really great. It allowed for a long story to be told in a relatively short time. It allowed for more things to be said in a short amount of time without it having to be like a big deal or a whole conversation. That's how backstories were told in some cases. It allowed for greater emotional expression for the characters and allowed them to really reveal thoughts and opinions that might have otherwise been cut out. And I think that's what makes musicals great. Although some viewers may not understand musicals, they just don't get it, they don't think it's realistic, that people are singing at each other all the time. That's not really the point, The lyrics are what bring the story along. They bring in that emotional side to characters, they explain conflicts, they carry the themes of the novel, and they bring it all together, I think. So this movie's just great. Musical motifs, natural feel, the overall dedication to making this version so real, and it really did the novel justice in this case. So I applaud Tom Hooper for making this version. It was probably the best version of Les Mis on screen. At the end of the day, all these movies are really great movies, and all for different reasons. I think that there's something to appreciate in all of them, and that no movie is made without some critical response. The look and feel to all these movies really show that they are creations of their time, but all attempt to bring Victor Hugo's story to life. If you want to watch an interesting movie with great acting, you got a lot of extra time on your hands, I recommend you watch the 2012 musical. It has actors you're probably familiar with, it has catchy songs, and it best covers the story of Hugo's original novel. If you don't like musicals much, and you're able to stay intrigued in a more moderately paced movie, the 1958 version might be more for you. It has great acting, and you get to listen to the pretty French language the entire time. But if trying to follow a story while reading subtitles makes you dizzy, and perhaps you're a fan of classic movies, and black and white films don't bore you, then the 1935 version could be for you. For a movie from the 30s, it's really easy to follow it. It's a really simple story. Plus, added bonus, it's like the normal movie. So that's pretty much all I have for you today. Let me know which is your favorite version of Les Mis and why. Thanks for watching. Until next time.